On Father's Day, my son sent me a gift box that was supposed to be a surprise, but my wife said, "Don't open it. It's not what you think." I asked, "Why? Can't you see?" I looked closer in frozen shock. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. What I found inside still haunts me to this day. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. But to understand why my 32-year-old son Tyler would send me something so twisted, you need to know what happened 6 days earlier. Dad, do you even understand that I need the money now? Not after you die? Tyler's voice cracked across our living room. The coffee cup in his hand trembled with rage before he slammed it down on Catherine's hand-hooked rug, the one she'd spent 6 months creating during her recovery from surgery last year. "Tyler," I said without turning around, "take your wife and leave. Don't come back until you're ready to discuss your financial problems and solutions that don't involve my wallet." "You'll regret this," Tyler hissed, grabbing his leather jacket. "When you're old and sick and need someone to take care of you, remember this moment. Remember how you chose money over family." Melissa collected her purse with theatrical dignity. "This isn't over, George. Family doesn't abandon family. There will be consequences for treating us this way." Their footsteps echoed across our hardwood floors like gunshots. Tyler paused at the threshold, his voice dropping to something menacing. "You think you're so smart cutting us off. But we know your routines, your schedule. We know exactly how to reach you." The threat hung in the air before the door slammed hard enough to rattle our windows. I remained frozen at the entrance, watching through the glass as Tyler's Porsche reversed aggressively out of our driveway, tires spinning on asphalt like an exclamation point on their dramatic exit. Catherine's soft footsteps approached from behind. "George," she whispered. I turned to survey the damage. Coffee stains had spread across Catherine's hand-hooked rug. 6 months of careful work ruined in seconds. Trust documents lay scattered across the floor like evidence of a crime. The overturned family photo seemed to be hiding in shame. 43 years. I said more to myself than to her. What? 43 years I worked overtime so Tyler could have new clothes for school, textbooks for college, that car for his 16th birthday. The wedding we couldn't afford but paid for anyway because Melissa insisted on her dream ceremony. Catherine began gathering the scattered papers, her movements careful and deliberate. "He's struggling, George. The gambling problem." "Brits, the gambling problem is his choice," I said sharply. "Every poker game, every online bet, every lie about where the money went. His choices." I walked to the mantel and righted the family photo. 5-year-old Tyler smiled back at me, gap-toothed and innocent, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. When had that joyful child become this manipulative stranger, demanding my life savings? My phone buzzed against the coffee table. A text from an unknown number, but I recognized Tyler's passive-aggressive style. "Dad, I hope you're happy. Oliver needs new school clothes and supplies, but apparently your precious money is more important than your grandson. Don't expect to see him anytime soon. Oliver." 7 years old, innocent, now being used as a weapon against his own grandfather. Tyler knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. I showed Catherine the message. Her face crumpled as she read it. He wouldn't really keep Oliver away from us, would he? But we both knew he would. Tyler had done it before during smaller arguments. A week here, 2 weeks there, whenever we didn't immediately comply with his financial demands. "Catherine, maybe we should reconsider." "No." The word came out like a gunshot. "No more. I won't be held hostage by threats about our grandson." 6 days of silence followed. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. In 3 years of financial crises, Tyler had never gone this long without contact. The quiet felt calculated, deliberate. Usually by day 3, he'd be calling with smaller requests, testing the waters before his next major plea for money. This felt different. Strategic. Like the calm before a storm. Father's Day forenoon arrived, gray and overcast, typical late spring weather in Denver. I sat on our front porch with the Sunday paper trying to find normalcy and routine while watching neighbors emerge for their weekend activities. The Hendersons were loading their car for what looked like a family picnic. The Patels were working in their garden, their daughter helping plant marigolds. Normal families doing normal things on Father's Day. Families where sons visited out of love rather than financial necessity. Catherine moved around inside the kitchen, the soft clatter of breakfast dishes providing a soundtrack of domestic peace. She'd asked no questions about my evening spent reviewing our financial accounts, but her slight smile suggested she understood what needed to be done. The silence from Tyler bothered me more than I wanted to admit. In 3 years of manufactured emergencies, he'd never gone 6 days without contact. Usually by day 3, he'd be calling with apologies and smaller requests testing whether his threats had softened my resolve. This felt different, calculated, like he was planning something bigger than his usual guilt trips and manipulation tactics. The rumble of a delivery truck broke through my thoughts. I looked up from the sports section to see a white FedEx vehicle slowing in front of our house. Strange. We weren't expecting anything, and Sunday deliveries were rare unless someone paid premium rates for weekend service. The driver hopped out, consulted his handheld scanner, then grabbed a medium-sized box from the back. He approached with the efficient stride of someone working holiday overtime, navigating around Catherine's carefully tended flower beds. "George Harrison. That's me. Happy Father's Day," he said with genuine warmth, offering the package and his electronic clipboard. "Someone must think highly of you to pay for Sunday delivery service." I signed my name, studying the shipping label as he walked back to his truck. No return address visible, just generic shipping information from a third-party service. The box felt surprisingly light for its size. Roughly shoebox dimensions, but weighing maybe 2 pounds at most. The weight seemed to shift slightly when I moved it. "Who's that from?" Catherine called from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "No idea." I carried the package inside, setting it on the coffee table where trust documents had scattered just 6 days earlier. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. "No return address," Catherine observed, approaching with the careful attention she brought to anything suspicious. Years of being married to an engineer had taught her to notice details others missed. "Maybe it's from Oliver," she suggested, but her tone lacked conviction. Our grandson had asked about Father's Day when we saw him last month before Tyler weaponized him against us. "Could be." I agreed, though something felt off. The timing seemed too convenient, too orchestrated. And Oliver certainly wouldn't have access to premium shipping services. Catherine leaned closer, examining the box with forensic attention. Her fingers traced the edges of the shipping label, looking for clues that might reveal the sender's identity. "George," she said slowly, her voice carrying a note of concern that made my stomach tighten. "Don't open it." "Why not?" She pointed to something I'd missed entirely in my casual handling. "Can't you see the holes? Look closely. They're tiny, but they're definitely there." My stomach dropped as she guided my attention to what I'd overlooked. Now that she'd pointed them out, I could see tiny punctures in the cardboard, barely visible, unless you knew exactly where to look. Small, precise holes that someone had made deliberately, using what looked like a thin nail or awl. "Breathing holes." I repeated, my voice sounding flat and distant. "Something's alive in there," Catherine confirmed, backing away from the coffee table as if the package might suddenly attack. "The question is, what kind of something, and why would anyone send us a living creature?" We stood there in our living room, staring at the innocent-looking package as if it might suddenly sprout legs and scurry away. The morning sunlight streaming through our windows seemed less warm now, the suburban quiet more ominous. Who would send us something alive? Catherine whispered, voicing the question forming in both our minds. But even as she asked, I felt cold certainty settling in my chest like ice water. The timing. Father's Day wasn't coincidental. The anonymous sender who somehow knew our address, our schedules, our vulnerabilities. Someone angry enough about our recent argument to plan something this elaborate, this deliberately cruel. Tyler's parting threat echoed in my memory. We know your routine's your schedule. We know exactly how to reach you. From inside the box came the faintest sound. A soft rustling that made us both freeze in place like deer sensing a predator. The sound stopped as quickly as it started, leaving us in tense silence, straining our ears for any repetition. Catherine grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin through the cotton of my polo shirt. Did you hear that? She breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Whatever was in that box was very much alive, and it was waking up, probably disturbed by our voices and movement around the coffee table. The sound came again, not just rustling this time, but something that made my blood run cold. A soft hissing, barely audible, but unmistakably real. We both froze, staring at the package as if it might explode at any moment. The hissing stopped. Silence stretched between us like a held breath, pregnant with possibility and fear. Then it came again, longer this time, more insistent. A distinct hiss that sent ice through my veins and confirmed my worst suspicions. Catherine's grip on my arm tightened until her nails bit through the fabric of my shirt. George, she whispered, her voice barely a breath of sound. Call someone now. This isn't a gift. This is a weapon. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, muscle memory taking over while my mind struggled to process what we were facing. The numbers felt foreign under my trembling fingers as I dialed the 3 digits I'd never expected to need in my own home. 911, what's your emergency? We have a suspicious package with something alive inside. The words tumbled out faster than intended, my voice cracking with stress. It was delivered this morning with no return address, and it's making hissing sounds. Like a snake. Sir, can you describe the sounds you're hearing more specifically? The dispatcher asked, her voice professionally calm. I glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly, though her face had gone pale. The hissing had stopped again, but we both knew it would return, probably louder and more agitated, as whatever was inside became more active. Hissing, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. Like a snake, and there are small holes punched in the cardboard. Breathing holes. My voice cracked on the last words as the full implications hit me. Someone had deliberately sent us a live, potentially dangerous animal as a Father's Day gift. The malice required for such an act was breathtaking. Are there any visible threats or damage to the package itself? No visible damage, but there are small holes punched in the cardboard. Breathing holes. Sir, I'm dispatching officers to your location immediately. Please maintain a safe distance from the package and do not attempt to open it under any circumstances. Can you move to another room? We're about 6 feet away in our living room. Should we leave the house? Stay inside, but keep your distance. Officers should arrive within 10 minutes. Do not touch or move the package under any circumstances. 10 minutes felt like an eternity when something potentially dangerous was sitting on our coffee table, growing more active with each passing moment. I could hear sirens in the distance growing louder as they approached our quiet suburban neighborhood. Who could have done this? Catherine asked once I hung up, her voice barely above a whisper. The question I'd been dreading. The answer felt obvious, but saying it out loud would make it real. Would acknowledge that our son had crossed a line I'd never imagined possible. Another sound from the box made us both step backward, not just hissing this time, but rustling that suggested movement, something shifting position, inside the confined space. Whatever was in there was definitely awake now, probably confused by its surroundings, possibly agitated by our voices and movement. Tyler's threat echoed in my memory. "We know your routines, your schedule. We know exactly how to reach you." The doorbell rang sharp and authoritative, cutting through the tense quiet of our home. I opened the door before Officer Thompson could knock a second time. His presence filled the doorframe, tall, solidly built, with the practiced alertness of someone who'd responded to countless domestic emergencies. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Officer Thompson. We received your call about a suspicious package containing what sounds like a live animal." "Yes, thank you for coming so quickly." I stepped aside to let him enter. "It's in the living room." He wiped his boots on our welcome mat before crossing the threshold, a detail that somehow made the surreal situation feel more grounded in everyday courtesy. Catherine appeared in the hallway, still wearing her apron, hands twisted together nervously. "Officer, we're just so grateful you're here. We didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly the right thing, ma'am." His voice carried calm authority, earned through years of handling domestic emergencies. "Can you show me the package?" We led him to the living room, where the box sat on our coffee table, looking smaller and more innocent now that professional help had arrived. Officer Thompson approached carefully, pulling latex gloves from his utility belt with practiced efficiency. "When did this arrive?" he asked, examining the package without touching it. "About an hour ago," I said. "Sunday delivery. Someone paid extra for weekend service." He studied the shipping label carefully, noting the absence of return address information. "And you heard sounds coming from inside." "Hissing," Catherine said quietly. "Like..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Like a snake," Officer Thompson completed matter-of-factly. "I've handled similar situations before. Usually non-venomous, but we take every precaution regardless." He reached for his radio with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47 requesting animal control services at 1247 Maple Street. Suspected snake delivery in residential package." The radio crackled back with immediate confirmation. "Animal control ETA 20 minutes. Officer Thompson turned back to us, shifting from procedural efficiency to investigative curiosity. "Do you have any idea who might have sent this?" The question I'd been dreading, the one that would force me to voice suspicions I didn't want to believe about my own son. I felt Catherine's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond, how much truth I was willing to share with a stranger about our family's dysfunction. "Probably just some kids playing pranks," I said carefully, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. His gaze sharpened slightly, the practiced perception of someone who'd heard countless half-truths during domestic calls. "Kids would need access to live animals, shipping materials, knowledge of your address, and money for premium delivery services. This required planning and resources." My mouth went dry. He was absolutely right. Someone with means and motive had deliberately sent us a live snake on Father's Day, and the list of suspects was tragically short. "Have you had any recent conflicts? Family disagreements, financial disputes?" Family disagreements. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation, inadequate to describe the destruction that had torn through our living room just 6 days earlier. Catherine tensed beside me, both of us, walking the emotional tightrope between honesty and family loyalty, between justice and protection of someone who might not deserve our continued silence. "Nothing that would lead to this," I managed, though the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Officer Thompson studied my face with professional patience, noting the hesitation, the careful word choice, the obvious discomfort. But he didn't push, perhaps recognizing the signs of a family in crisis. Instead, he pulled out a small notebook and pen. "Any unusual charges on your credit cards recently? Pet stores, exotic animal suppliers, anything that might be connected?" The question hit me like a physical blow, triggering a memory I'd been trying to suppress. Pet stores. The realization crashed over me with terrible clarity. That charge I'd noticed on last month's statement, the one I'd dismissed as innocuous. Tyler used my credit card for emergencies, a privilege I'd granted him years ago during college and never revoked. Reptile Palace. $127.50. I'd assumed it was something for Oliver, maybe a small pet or educational toy. Not this. Never this. Mr. Harrison, are you all right? I forced my expression back to neutral, though my heart hammered against my ribs. I'm fine. Just processing all this. But I wasn't fine. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with horrifying precision. The timing, the knowledge of our routines, the access to my financial accounts, the deliberate cruelty of choosing Father's Day for maximum emotional impact. My son had sent me a snake. Another vehicle pulled into our driveway. Through the window, I could see a white van with Animal Control Services painted on the side. "That'll be Mike Johnson," Officer Thompson said. "Best wildlife specialist in the county. He'll have this resolved safely within the hour." But as I watched the animal control officer grab his equipment, I knew the real situation was just beginning. Mike Johnson from Animal Control worked with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd handled stranger situations than ours. He approached our coffee table with professional equipment designed specifically for dangerous wildlife removal. Thick gloves, specialized tongs, and a secure transport carrier that looked like it could contain whatever nightmare was lurking in that cardboard box. "Let's see what we're dealing with here," Mike said, carefully examining the package from multiple angles. He noted the breathing holes, the size and weight distribution, the way the box shifted slightly when moved. "Based on the hissing sounds you described and the container size, I'm guessing we're looking at a medium-sized snake. Probably non-venomous, but I never make assumptions when it comes to reptiles." Officer Thompson maintained a safe distance, his hand resting casually near his radio in case backup was needed. Catherine gripped my arm as Mike began the delicate process of opening the package using his specialized tools to avoid direct contact with whatever was inside. The cardboard flaps came apart slowly, revealing layers of packing material designed to keep the contents secure during shipping. Mike peeled back foam padding and newspaper, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Here we go," he said quietly, using his tongs to carefully lift out a 3-foot corn snake, its orange and red patterned scales gleaming under our living room lights. The snake was beautiful in a way that made its presence in our home even more disturbing. "Corn snake," Mike confirmed, securing the animal in his transport carrier with practiced ease. "Non-venomous, actually quite docile when handled properly. These make excellent pets when cared for correctly." He examined the snake briefly through the carrier's transparent walls. "This one's healthy, well-fed, probably cost someone a couple $100 from a reputable dealer. Beautiful specimen, really. Shame someone used it for whatever this was supposed to accomplish." Officer Thompson took notes while Mike secured the carrier in his van. "Any way to trace where this came from?" "The animal itself? Not really. Corn snakes are common in the pet trade. Could have come from any reptile store in the state. But the shipping information might give you leads if you decide to investigate further." Mike returned to collect the empty box and packing materials. "I'll take this to the local reptile rescue. They'll find it a proper home with someone who actually wants a snake as a pet." After both vehicles departed, Catherine and I stood in our suddenly quiet living room, processing what had just happened. The coffee table bore faint water stains where Mike had disinfected the surface. The morning that had started so peacefully now felt like we'd survived some kind of domestic terrorism. "Will you be filing a formal report?" Officer Thompson had asked before leaving. "We can investigate the package origin, pursue charges if we identify the sender." I'd looked at Catherine, seeing the same conflict in her eyes. Part of me wanted justice, but the larger part, the part that had spent 32 years protecting Tyler, despite his flaws, couldn't bring myself to turn him over to police. "No," I'd said quietly. "I don't want to make this bigger than it needs to be. If it's just a prank, filing charges seems excessive. Officer Thompson had made a note, though his expression suggested he'd heard this response before. Family loyalty trumping justice, even when family members crossed dangerous lines. Call if you remember anything else about possible senders, Mr. Harrison. Even pranks like this can escalate if left unchecked. But now, standing in our violated living room, I felt the weight of that decision. The professional cleanup couldn't erase what had happened here. Someone I'd raised, someone I'd sacrificed everything for, had deliberately tried to terrify his elderly parents with a live animal. The credit card charge burned in my memory like a brand. Reptile Palace, $127.50. 3 weeks ago, right after our inheritance argument. Perfect timing for planning revenge. Catherine moved around the kitchen stress cleaning with unnecessary vigor, her standard response to family crisis keeping her hands busy while her mind processed trauma. I stood at the front window watching the Hendersons return from their Father's Day outing. Their car was loaded with picnic gear, and children's laughter carried across our quiet street. Normal families, normal Sunday mornings, normal fathers who didn't receive venomous surprises from their children. My phone felt heavy in my hands as I scrolled to Tyler's contact information. His smiling photo looked back at me. A picture from Oliver's birthday party last year, before the financial demands escalated, before the threats about grandson access, before this morning's snake delivery. "Are you really going to call him?" Catherine asked quietly from the kitchen doorway. "I need to know for certain," I replied. "And I need him to understand that this crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." The phone rang twice before Tyler picked up his voice, carrying that artificial brightness he used when he wanted something or was hiding something particularly significant. "Dad, how's your Father's Day going?" My grip tightened on the phone. If he was innocent, the question was natural, expected. If he was guilty, it was cruel mockery designed to twist the knife of his betrayal. Interesting morning, actually. I kept my voice neutral, conversational, giving him rope to hang himself with. "Tyler, you wouldn't happen to know anything about a strange Father's Day gift that arrived this morning?" "No, Dad. What happened?" His response came quickly, too quickly, with the practiced smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation. But it was what happened next that confirmed my worst suspicions beyond any doubt. In the background, unmistakably, I heard Melissa's quiet laughter. Not the surprised chuckle of someone hearing unexpected news, but the satisfied snicker of someone who thought they'd gotten away with something particularly clever. The sound hit me like a physical blow, shattering the last fragments of hope that this might be some terrible misunderstanding. All doubt vanished in that moment of careless amusement. My son had sent me a snake, and his wife found it entertaining. "Actually, Tyler, I need to tell you something important," I said, abandoning any pretense of ignorance. "I called the police about that package. They came and removed a live snake from the box you sent." The silence on the other end was deafening, filled with the weight of exposed guilt and scrambling mental calculations. "A snake, Tyler. Someone sent me a potentially dangerous live snake on Father's Day. The police investigated thoroughly, but I chose not to file formal charges yet." I could hear his rapid breathing through the phone, the sound of someone whose carefully planned revenge had just exploded in his face. "I know it was you, son. The credit card charge at Reptile Palace, the timing, the Sunday delivery to ensure we'd be home and unsuspecting. But I want you to understand something crucial. This crossed a line that can never be uncrossed." "Dad, I can explain." Tyler started, his voice high with panic. "No," I cut him off with quiet firmness. "There's no explanation that justifies terrorizing your parents with a live animal. You used my own credit card to buy a snake to frighten me. You planned this for weeks, calculating the maximum psychological impact." The phone went silent, except for Tyler's rapid breathing and what sounded like frantic whispering between him and Melissa in the background. "This conversation is over, Tyler. But understand this. What you did today wasn't just a prank. It was a deliberate act of cruelty designed to punish me for refusing to hand over my life savings. You've shown me exactly who you really are. Dad, wait, you don't understand the pressure we're under. Tyler's voice cracked with desperation. The debts, the bills, Oliver's school expenses. We needed that money. You needed to learn responsibility, I replied coldly. Instead, you chose to terrorize your parents. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. This isn't over, Tyler said, his panic transforming into the familiar tone of entitlement and threat. You can't just cut us off and expect no consequences. The consequences started the moment you sent that snake, I said. And they're going to be far more severe than you imagine. I ended the call before Tyler could respond, before my carefully maintained composure could crack completely. The phone trembled in my hands as the full weight of betrayal settled over me like a heavy blanket. Catherine appeared at my side, reading my face with the intuition of 38 years of marriage. You heard something that confirmed it. Melissa laughed. The words came out flat, emotionless. In the background, when Tyler pretended not to know what happened. She laughed like it was the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Catherine's hand found my arm, a steadying presence in the shifting landscape of our family dynamics. What are you going to do? I looked down at the phone, then toward my home office, where the computer held access to bank accounts, credit cards, and all the financial tools that had kept Tyler afloat for 3 years running. I'm going to teach my son about consequences. 7 o'clock that evening found me sitting in my home office, door closed, computer humming quietly in the gathering darkness. I'd spent the afternoon in careful thought, walking through our neighborhood, reviewing 3 decades of financial decisions that had brought us to this devastating moment. The anger had settled into something colder, more purposeful, more strategic. My desk held the accumulated evidence of a father's misplaced generosity. Bank statements showing monthly transfers to cover Tyler's rent. Credit card bills I'd paid without question for years. Insurance premiums, car payments, emergency loans that were never repaid. 3 decades of enabling disguised as parental love, creating a monster instead of a responsible adult. The leather portfolio beside my keyboard contained documents I'd reviewed dozens of times over the years. Copies of checks written for Tyler's wedding, receipts from the car I'd sold to pay his gambling debts, bank transfers labeled emergency assistance that had become monthly obligations. Each piece of paper told the same tragic story of a son who had learned to see his father as an endless source of money rather than wisdom. The computer screen glowed as I navigated to our online banking portal. My fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, typing familiar passwords I'd never shared with Tyler, though he'd managed to access plenty without official permission. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to use the same financial tools that had enabled his irresponsibility to finally teach him about consequences. First, the credit card account. The same one that showed the Reptile Palace charge from 3 weeks ago. Tyler appeared as an authorized user, a status I'd granted him during college for emergencies. 20-year-old emergencies that had multiplied into a permanent lifestyle of dependency and entitlement. I clicked on Manage Users, watching the screen load with options I should have exercised years earlier. The system prompted me with security questions designed to protect account access. My mother's maiden name, the street where I grew up. Simple answers that unlocked access to tools I should have used long ago. Remove authorized user, the screen asked, in neutral blue text. My cursor hovered over Confirm for perhaps 10 seconds, not from hesitation, but from the profound shift I felt occurring within myself. 30 years of funding irresponsibility was about to end with a single click. Enough, I whispered to the empty office and clicked. User access revoked. Changes will take effect within 1 business hour. Next came PIN changes. Tyler had somehow learned the numbers, probably from watching over my shoulder during one of our many financial rescue missions. I selected new digits carefully. The year Catherine and I were married. Numbers that meant something to our relationship, but nothing to our son's schemes. The automated payments required more careful attention. Monthly transfers to Tyler's checking account, recurring payments for his car insurance, subscription services for everything from his gym membership to streaming services that he'd convinced me were essential for his mental health during his latest period of unemployment. Each cancellation required individual confirmation, creating a digital paper trail of my decision to stop being his private bank. My hands remained steady throughout the process. No trembling, no hesitation, no second guessing. This wasn't cruelty. It was overdue accountability. I remembered the conversation just last month when Tyler had called sobbing about new gambling debts, promising this was absolutely the last time, the final crisis I'd ever need to solve. I'd believed him, completely transferred another $5,000 without question, and told Catherine we were helping our son learn financial responsibility. Instead, I'd been teaching him that consequences were optional, that failure would always be cushioned by parental bailouts. The final screen showed a comprehensive summary of changes. Credit access removed automatic payments, canceled PIN codes, updated security questions, modified. The systematic work of 30 years of enabling undone in 30 minutes of methodical clicking. Save changes. I clicked without hesitation. Outside my office window, the suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were grilling dinner in their backyard, their children's laughter carrying across the quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson walked her small dog past our mailbox, probably wondering about the police cars that had been in our driveway that morning. Normal families living normal lives, probably not dealing with adult children who sent live snakes as Father's Day gifts. The confirmation appeared instantly. Account changes processed. Updated information will be available immediately. I leaned back in my leather desk chair, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to Tyler. Complete control. Not the desperate, reactive scrambling to fix his latest crisis, but the calm authority of a parent who'd finally remembered that love sometimes requires saying no. Tomorrow morning, Tyler would discover that his financial safety net had been removed without warning. His credit card would be declined at the grocery store. His automatic payments would bounce, triggering late fees and embarrassing phone calls. His assumed access to my resources would simply end, forcing him to confront reality for the first time in his adult life. The phone on my desk remained silent, but I knew that wouldn't last long. Tyler's financial dependency was so complete that he'd discover the cutoff within hours of trying to make his first purchase. Morning arrived with unusual peace. I sat at our kitchen table with coffee and the newspaper, watching sunlight filter through Catherine's herb garden on the windowsill. For the first time in years, I felt no anxiety about potential financial emergencies, no dread of manipulative phone calls. Catherine moved quietly around the kitchen, refilling my coffee cup with the comfortable efficiency of 38 years of shared mornings. She'd asked no questions about my evening in the office, but her slight smile suggested she understood perfectly what I'd accomplished. The phone rang at 8:15. Tyler's name appeared on the caller ID, exactly as expected. I let it ring twice more before answering, using those extra seconds to center myself. "Good morning, Tyler." "Dad, what have you done?" "My card isn't working. I tried to buy groceries and it was declined. The automatic payment for my car insurance bounced. What is happening?" His voice hit me like a physical assault, shrill with panic. I took a sip of coffee before responding, savoring the moment of control. "Tyler, I know you sent me that Father's Day gift," I said calmly. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted from panic to defensive fury. "You've lost your mind. How could you set me up like this?" "Set him up, not what are you talking about or what Father's Day gift." The man who had sent me a snake was now accusing me of setting traps. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "I simply stopped paying for your irresponsibility." This is insane. You can't just cut me off without warning. I have bills, obligations, responsibilities. Tyler's voice cracked through the phone. Responsibilities? I let the word hang between us. Like the responsibility to treat your parents with basic respect, like the responsibility to handle your own finances instead of depending on mine. Catherine had stopped her morning routine to watch my face, reading my expressions for signs of stress. But I felt remarkably calm, almost detached from Tyler's hysteria. Dad, please, you don't understand. Melissa and I are struggling right now. The apartment rent is due, and my car payment. Your car payment that I've been making for 2 years. Your apartment rent that comes out of my account every month. Perhaps it's time you understood what actual financial responsibility looks like. Fine. You want to play games? His voice rose to a pitch that would have concerned me yesterday. Don't expect to see your grandson anytime soon. Oliver won't even remember you by the time... Tyler. I cut him off with quiet firmness. Those threats stopped working yesterday morning. The phone went silent except for his rapid breathing. I could almost hear him recalibrating, searching for the manipulation tactic that had always worked before. I can't believe you're doing this to me, he whispered, switching to the victim voice that had opened my wallet countless times. I'm your son. I'm struggling. And instead of helping me, you're punishing me for something I didn't even do. Something he didn't even do. Still no direct denial. No confusion about what gift I'd referenced. Just the blanket deflection of someone who knew exactly what he'd done and was angry about facing consequences. Your struggle is not my responsibility, I said. Your choices created your situation. Your choices sent that package. Your choices will determine what happens next. You're being ridiculous. One little prank and you completely lose your mind. One little prank. There it was. Not quite a confession, but close enough to confirm what his panicked overreaction had already revealed. He'd sent me a live snake as a little prank and now expected me to continue funding his lifestyle. A prank involving a dangerous animal isn't little Tyler. And a father cutting off financial support after 30 years of enabling isn't losing his mind. It's finally finding it. His voice turned arctic. This isn't over, old man. You think you can control me by controlling money. We'll see about that. The line went dead. I set the phone down gently and looked at Catherine, who had watched the entire conversation with growing admiration. He's coming here, Catherine said quietly. I nodded. Probably with Melissa. They'll want to continue this conversation in person. Are you ready for that? I thought about the question seriously. Was I ready for my son to arrive at our home with his unemployed wife, demanding access to money he'd never earned, threatening grandchildren he'd already weaponized? Yes, I said. I think I am. The sound of a car engine roaring into our driveway shattered the morning calm. Tires squealed against asphalt as the vehicle stopped abruptly, followed by the sharp slam of 2 car doors. Catherine and I exchanged a glance. We both knew who had arrived. Heavy footsteps marched across our front walkway with determined rhythm. The doorbell rang once sharp and demanding, then immediately again when no one answered fast enough. I stood slowly, feeling remarkably calm, despite the approaching storm. Stay here, I told Catherine quietly. No. Her voice carried unexpected strength. We're in this together. The doorbell gave way to aggressive knocking. I walked to the front entrance and opened it to find Tyler and Melissa standing on our porch like a 2-person army ready for battle. Tyler's face was flushed red with anger, his hair disheveled as if he'd dressed hastily and driven here in fury. Melissa loomed behind him, her expression dark with malice I'd never seen directed at me before. Dad. Tyler's voice vibrated with barely controlled rage. We need to talk. We already talked this morning. I remained in the doorway, not inviting them inside. I thought I was quite clear. Clear? Melissa laughed harshly. You were insane. You can't just cut him off because of some ridiculous misunderstanding about a Father's Day package. Even now, standing on my doorstep, demanding money, she couldn't bring herself to admit what they'd done. There's no misunderstanding, Melissa. You sent me a snake. I responded appropriately. Tyler stepped forward, his bulk filling more of the doorway. Look, old man, maybe you didn't think this through properly. I have expenses, responsibilities. Oliver needs things. Oliver, whose mother threatens to keep him away from his grandparents when she doesn't get money, I replied evenly. Melissa's face contorted with desperate fury. Fine, you want to play hardball. You'll never see your grandson again. Oliver will grow up knowing his grandfather chose money over family. The words that had once been my greatest fear now felt powerless against the clarity I'd gained. I looked at my son and saw not the child I'd raised, but the manipulative stranger he'd become. Melissa, I said quietly, that's not a threat. That's a consequence. The shock on her face was complete. This was not the response they'd expected, not the devastating blow that had always brought me to my knees before. Tyler's mouth fell open. What? If you're the kind of people who use children as weapons against their grandparents, then perhaps it's better that Oliver isn't exposed to that kind of manipulation while he's young. Tyler's expression shifted to something darker. He stepped forward close enough that I could smell the anger radiating from him. We know where you live, old man, he said, his voice low and menacing. We know your routines, your schedule. You might want to reconsider your position. I felt Catherine tense behind me, but I remained perfectly still. Are you threatening me, Tyler? I'm just saying that family relationships work both ways. You want to cut us off, fine, but don't expect us to just disappear quietly. Actually, I said, that's exactly what I expect. And if you choose not to disappear quietly, that becomes a matter for the police rather than family negotiation. Melissa grabbed Tyler's arm, perhaps sensing he was pushing into territory that could have legal consequences. But her touch didn't calm him. It seemed to fuel his aggression. You think you're so smart, Tyler continued. You think cutting off our money makes you powerful. There are other ways to get what we need. I'm sure there are, I agreed. Like getting jobs, for instance. Novel concept, but people have been supporting themselves through employment for centuries. This isn't over, Melissa hissed, her desperation transforming into pure venom. You'll regret treating us this way. Family doesn't abandon family, and there will be consequences. There already are consequences, I said. You're living them right now. They stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding that no amount of threats, guilt, or manipulation was going to restore their access to my resources. The man who had spent 30 years being their personal bank had simply closed. Without another word, Tyler spun on his heel and stalked back to their car. Melissa followed, but not before giving me one last menacing look. I watched them drive away, their Porsche engine revving unnecessarily loud. Only when their taillights disappeared did I close the front door and turn to Catherine. Her face was pale, but her eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Pride. We're going to need legal advice, I said. Evening brought the quiet normalcy that had become precious in our house. Catherine and I sat at our kitchen table after dinner, the domestic routine providing comfort after the morning's chaos. She sipped chamomile tea while I nursed my second cup of coffee, both of us processing the day's events. The kitchen had always been our sanctuary for serious conversations. It was here we'd discussed buying the house, planned for retirement, talked through concerns about Tyler's early struggles with money. Now it served as the place where we contemplated the complete breakdown of our family relationship. I keep thinking about when he was 8, Catherine said quietly. Remember the Father's Day breakfast? He made burned toast and orange juice with too much pulp. but he was so proud. I did remember Tyler in his Superman pajamas, standing on a kitchen stool to reach the counter, determined to surprise us with breakfast in bed. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's family now. He used to draw us pictures, I said. Stick figures of our family holding hands. I kept them in my office desk drawer for years. I still have some in that memory box upstairs. Catherine's voice carried maternal grief. George, he's still our son, despite everything that's happened today. The words I'd been expecting all day. Catherine's instinct to heal, to find middle ground, to somehow restore what had been broken. It was one of the qualities I'd fallen in love with. This unwavering belief that families could overcome anything. Catherine, I said gently, he crossed a line. I have one more step to take. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. What kind of step? I looked at my wife's face, seeing the concern there, the hope that whatever I was planning might somehow bring our son back instead of pushing him further away. Something permanent, I said. Something that ensures this morning's scene never happens again. You're talking about changing the trust? It wasn't a question. Catherine knew me well enough to follow my thought process to understand that legal protection was the only solution left. Among other things, yes. She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the implications. Changing our estate planning would be more than a financial decision. It would be a formal acknowledgement that our son was no longer trustworthy. What about Oliver? She said finally. He's innocent in all this. Oliver will be better off not learning that love can be purchased with money. I reached across the table and took her hand. Catherine, what Tyler did today wasn't desperation. It was calculated cruelty. The snake, the threats, the manipulation. That's who he's chosen to become. But if we cut him out completely, we protect ourselves from future abuse. We protect our marriage from constantly managing his crises. We protect our retirement from being slowly drained away by someone who sees us as a resource rather than parents. Catherine squeezed my hand, her thumb tracing across my knuckles in the gesture that had comforted me through decades of smaller challenges. This wasn't a smaller challenge, though. This was the end of something fundamental. Will it stop him? She asked. If you change everything legally, will he finally leave us alone? It will remove his incentive for contact. No access to money, no inheritance to protect, no leverage to maintain. He'll have to find other people to manipulate. The pragmatism of it felt cold, but necessary. Tyler would move on to easier targets, people who hadn't yet learned to recognize his patterns. I hate that it's come to this, Catherine whispered. So do I. But I won't spend our remaining years being held hostage by threats and manipulation. I won't let him destroy what we've built together. Outside our kitchen window, the suburban evening continued its peaceful rhythm. The Hendersons were walking their dog. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden. Normal people living normal lives. When will you do it? Catherine asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll call Margaret Williams first thing. She's handled our legal work for 15 years. She'll know exactly what needs to be done to make it ironclad. Catherine nodded slowly, accepting the inevitable even as it broke her heart. And if Tyler finds out? He will eventually, but by then, the legal protections will be in place. His anger won't be able to touch us anymore. I stood up from the table, carrying our empty cups to the sink. Behind me, I heard Catherine's quiet sigh. Not disagreement, but grief for the son we'd lost. Tomorrow, I would take that final step. Tonight, I would hold my wife and let her mourn the family we'd thought we were. Margaret Williams's law office occupied the third floor of a granite building downtown. Its walls lined with legal volumes that spoke of 15 years protecting families like ours. I sat across from her mahogany desk with a manila folder of documents, feeling calmer than I had in weeks. George, she said, removing her reading glasses, When you called this morning, you mentioned needing comprehensive legal protection. Tell me what's been happening. Margaret had handled our Will's property transfers and Catherine's mother's estate. She knew us as the stable couple who planned ahead and paid bills promptly. What I was about to describe would sound like a different family entirely. I explained the inheritance argument, the snake delivery, the blocked credit cards, yesterday's threatening confrontation. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. Tyler said they know where we live, know our routines, I concluded. It felt like a direct threat. She set down her pen and leaned back. George, this goes beyond a family disagreement. You're describing harassment and intimidation. We need to address this on multiple fronts. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's start with your trust. You mentioned wanting to restructure your inheritance distribution. I want my money to go to Oliver's education, not to Tyler's casino, I said. Direct beneficiary with an independent trustee managing the funds until he turns 25. That's a wise decision, George. Her voice carried professional warmth. We can create an educational trust fund that provides for Oliver's schooling, college expenses, and legitimate educational needs, while preventing any access by his parents. She outlined the framework. An independent trustee would manage the funds, releasing money only for documented educational expenses. Tyler and Melissa would have no access, no control, no ability to manipulate their son's inheritance. What about Catherine? I asked. Fully protected, of course. The house, your retirement accounts, her security. Nothing changes there. This only affects what would have gone to Tyler. Next came the restraining order documentation. Margaret opened a new file and began systematically recording yesterday's confrontation, the threatening language, the escalating pattern that had culminated in actual intimidation. The snake incident is particularly concerning, she said, writing quickly. Using live animals to frighten elderly parents shows planning and malice that courts take seriously. How long does this process take? The trust modifications can be finalized within the week. The restraining order can be filed today. Once it's granted, any contact from Tyler or Melissa becomes a legal matter rather than a family dispute. I felt something release in my chest, a tension I'd been carrying for months. The weight of being perpetually available for Tyler's crises of walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his threats of enabling destructive behavior, all of it was ending. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Based on what you've described, I recommend documenting everything for potential future legal action. Keep records of any attempts to contact you, any violations, any attempts to involve Oliver. You think it will get worse before it gets better? People who use manipulation and threats don't usually accept boundaries gracefully. When Tyler discovers he's been cut out of your trust and served with a restraining order, his reaction may be significant. But that no longer frightened me. With legal protections in place, his anger would be directed at a system designed to handle such behavior, not at two elderly parents trying to enjoy their retirement. Margaret's assistant brought in the prepared documents. As I signed my name to each page, I felt the satisfying finality of decisions made and implemented. 30 years of financial enabling was officially ending. Our home would be legally protected from harassment. The restraining orders should be approved by end of business today, Margaret said. Court officers will serve both Tyler and Melissa by tomorrow morning. After that, any contact with you or Catherine becomes a criminal matter. I stood to leave, shaking hands with the woman who had just helped me reclaim control of my own life. Outside her office windows, the city continued its normal rhythm. George Munn, Margaret called as I reached her door. You've made the right choices. Your family's safety and security come first. I nodded, tucking the folder under my arm. Tomorrow morning, Tyler would discover that manipulation was no longer an option. Tonight, Catherine and I would sleep peacefully, knowing the law was finally on our side. 2 days passed in the most peaceful quiet I'd experienced in years. Catherine and I fell back into comfortable routines that had been constantly interrupted by Tyler's crises. Morning coffee without dreading phone calls, afternoon walks without checking for missed messages, evening dinners without discussing the latest financial emergency. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called to confirm what I'd been anticipating. "George, the documents were delivered at 2:15 today. Both Tyler and Melissa have been served with a restraining order, and they've received copies of the trust modifications. It's done." I thanked her and hung up, then sat quietly in my chair for several minutes. Outside our window, Mrs. Patterson was planting spring flowers in her garden. The Henderson children were riding bicycles on the sidewalk. Normal suburban life continuing its peaceful rhythm. "The papers were delivered?" Catherine asked from the kitchen doorway. "This afternoon," I confirmed. "It's finished." She came and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. We didn't need to discuss what Tyler's reaction might be or whether he would try to find ways around the legal barriers Margaret had erected. The law was clear. The protections were comprehensive. And for the first time in 30 years, we were truly free from his manipulation. I thought about the son I'd raised, the little boy who'd drawn stick figure families and made breakfast in bed on special occasions. That child had grown into someone who sent live snakes to his father and threatened to weaponize his own son against his grandparents. The transformation had been gradual enough that I'd spent decades making excuses for increasingly unacceptable behavior. But the man who'd stood on my doorstep demanding money and making threats wasn't someone I needed to enable any longer. The legal documents had created the boundaries that love alone could never establish. Oliver would be provided for through the modified trust managed by professionals who couldn't be manipulated or threatened. His college expenses, tutoring books, legitimate educational needs all secured without giving his parents access to resources they'd proven incapable of managing responsibly. As the sun set through our kitchen window, Catherine and I prepared dinner together with the easy cooperation of a couple who no longer carried the weight of constant family drama. No phone calls interrupted our conversation. No emergency texts demanded immediate financial rescue. No threats hung over our heads about access to our grandson. The quiet felt profound, like the silence after a long, exhausting storm has finally passed. Tomorrow we would wake up in a house legally protected from harassment. Our retirement savings would remain intact, earning interest for our own security, rather than being slowly drained by someone else's poor choices. I had reclaimed my role as a father who loved his son enough to refuse to enable his destruction of himself and others. Legal boundaries had replaced emotional manipulation. Professional consequences had replaced family guilt. The revocable living trust had given me the power to protect Oliver's future while ending Tyler's access to unearned wealth. Unlike a will, the trust allowed me to change beneficiaries at any time during my lifetime. No court approval needed, no public disclosure required. I maintained complete control while alive, and my assets would transfer privately to my chosen beneficiary upon death. For elderly parents facing financial manipulation, remember this. Your love should never become a hostage to threats. Enabling destructive behavior isn't kindness, it's cruelty, disguised as generosity. Set clear boundaries and enforce them through legal protection when necessary. Your security matters as much as anyone else's happiness. For adult children, understand that your parents' retirement funds weren't accumulated for your convenience. Every dollar they saved came from sacrifice you may never fully comprehend. Respect their choices, earn their trust, and never use your children as weapons against their grandparents. Tonight, for the first time in decades, I would sleep without wondering what tomorrow's crisis would cost me. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.